For nearly 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were seen as the definition of love and loyalty. Two shining stars who seemed untouched by Hollywood's chaos. But as time passed, cracks began to show beneath the perfect image. And now, Nicole has finally spoken, revealing a side of her marriage that no one saw coming. A side filled with loneliness, emotional battles, and the haunting truth about what it really means to love someone who's fighting their own darkness. This is the story behind Nicole Kidman's shocking revelation, and the hidden side of Keith Urban the world never knew. The fairy tale that fooled everyone. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban first met in 2005, it felt like destiny had finally smiled on them both. Two global icons, two hearts that had endured their share of heartbreak, crossing paths at a time when they both needed something real. Nicole was already one of Hollywood's most admired women, an Oscar-winning actress celebrated not only for her talent, but for her quiet composure. After a decade-long marriage to Tom Cruise and the storm that followed their split, she had become a symbol of strength. To the world, she was untouchable, poised, graceful, and unshakable. But behind the calm exterior was a woman who longed for stability and genuine affection. Keith Urban, meanwhile, was a man whose charm and charisma had made him a country music sensation. His songs painted pictures of love, redemption, and hope. But his real life told a different story. He was open about his struggles with addiction, the constant tug-of-war between fame and personal demons. Behind the twang of his guitar and that trademark smile was a man still searching for peace. When he met Nicole, he saw light, someone who made him want to be better. And she, in turn, saw a kind of warmth she hadn't felt in years. Their union seemed perfect. Hollywood royalty meets Nashville soul. It was the story everyone wanted to believe in. A romance that blurred the lines between glitz and sincerity. When they married in 2006, under candlelight in Sydney surrounded by family and friends, the world watched in awe. The images from that night were pure magic. Nicole glowing in her lace gown, Keith visibly emotional as he sang for her. For a while, it really did look like the fairy tale had come true. But the truth, as Nicole would one day admit, was far more complicated. Fame can be intoxicating, but it also magnifies every flaw. Behind every red carpet smile were questions neither of them wanted to answer. Keith's career demanded constant touring. Nicole's acting took her across continents. Their lives were a whirlwind of schedules, airports, and separation. What the world saw as a glamorous life together often meant being apart more than they were united. Still, Nicole did what she always did. She held everything together. She became Keith's quiet support system, standing by him as he entered rehab just months after their wedding. Publicly, she smiled and said she was proud of his courage. Privately, she struggled to reconcile the man she loved with the man haunted by his own battles. Keith's journey toward recovery wasn't a straight path. There were relapses, self-doubt, and moments when the weight of fame pushed him to the edge. Nicole's friends noticed the toll it was taking. The always composed actress began withdrawing, spending long periods away from the spotlight. She threw herself into her work, finding comfort in her characters when real life felt too heavy. Behind the scenes, she was managing more than just her husband's well-being. She was managing the public perception of their marriage. Hollywood loved the image of a golden couple, and Nicole, ever the professional, made sure the illusion stayed intact. But illusions come at a cost. The dark side that Nicole would later allude to wasn't one of scandal or betrayal. It was quieter, more insidious. It was the emotional exhaustion of constantly pretending everything was fine. It was the loneliness that comes from being seen by millions but truly known by no one. Fame demands perfection, and Nicole had been perfect for too long. In interviews, she often spoke about love as something that requires work, patience, and forgiveness. Yet, between the lines, her words revealed something deeper. "When people see a perfect marriage," she once said, "they stop seeing the people inside it." Those words were a window into her reality. The unspoken truth that the love story adored by millions was also suffocating her spirit. Keith, for his part, loved her deeply. But addiction and fame are forces that twist even the strongest hearts. While he was being celebrated on stage, Nicole was often left at home, trying to hold on to a relationship that felt increasingly one-sided. Their worlds, once so beautifully intertwined, began to drift apart. She became the anchor, steady and unyielding, while he fought his internal storms. But even anchors grow heavy when the waves never stop. Family and friends tried to intervene quietly. There were counseling sessions, heartfelt conversations, and emotional promises. But the truth was clear. They were two people trying to save each other from the shadows of their own lives. The fairy tale that had once given them hope was slowly turning into something they both struggled to sustain. Nicole's revelation years later didn't come from anger. It came from reflection. When she finally spoke about the dark side, she wasn't condemning Keith. She was acknowledging the painful truth that love can't always fix what's broken inside another person. It can comfort, it can protect, but it can also consume. Looking back, she admitted that the life they lived was both beautiful and suffocating. The lights, the cameras, the constant expectation to be perfect. All of it created a wall between who they were and who the world wanted them to be. What began as a fairy tale love story became a quiet test of endurance. And in the end, even Nicole Kidman, the picture of grace, was forced to face what every human being eventually learns: that no matter how much love you give, you can't save someone who's still learning how to save themselves. Because sometimes, the darkness doesn't come from outside forces or betrayal. It comes from silence, from distance, from two people who love each other deeply, but no longer know how to bridge the space between them. The fairy tale fooled everyone, including them. And as Nicole would later reveal, even the most perfect love stories can carry shadows that never truly fade. Behind closed doors, the side no one saw. The world first caught wind of their romance in 2005, when Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban met at an event honoring Australians in the entertainment industry. The spark was immediate. Two celebrated figures, both at the peak of their fame, drawn together not by Hollywood strategy, but by genuine chemistry. The cameras loved them, and within months, their relationship became a global fascination. For Nicole, who had just turned 38, Keith seemed like the calm after a storm. For Keith, meeting Nicole was like finding light in a life that had seen too much darkness. Their wedding in June 2006 in Sydney, Australia, felt like a national event. The candlelit ceremony was intimate yet iconic, a moment that united Hollywood and Nashville, the two worlds that defined them. It was a fairy tale scene, but behind the vows and smiles, neither of them could have predicted how soon that fairy tale would be tested. Only a few months into their marriage, Keith checked himself into rehab for substance abuse. The headlines were merciless, and yet Nicole stood firm, telling the world that love meant standing by the people you care about, especially when it's hardest. That was the first real glimpse of what went on behind closed doors. From 2007 onward, Nicole became both partner and protector. She flew between movie sets and rehab centers, balancing her demanding career with the emotional labor of keeping Keith afloat. She once said she believed in walking through the fire together, and in those years, she truly did. But fire, no matter how noble your intentions, always leaves a mark. Through the 2010s, both of their careers reached new heights. Keith became a judge on American Idol, gaining even more fame in the US, while Nicole continued taking on complex film roles that reflected a woman navigating inner conflict. To the world, they appeared unshakable. A power couple who had endured the worst and come out stronger. They were raising two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, splitting time between the quiet calm of their Nashville home and the spotlight of Los Angeles. But as their public image glowed brighter, the private strain quietly deepened. Nashville was Keith's haven and his battlefield. It was where his music was born, where his community embraced him, and where old temptations lingered in the shadows. Every street, every bar, every late-night studio session carried reminders of the life he was trying to leave behind. Nicole, meanwhile, came from a world that demanded composure and perfection. In Hollywood, every movement was analyzed, every expression dissected. Where Keith's world celebrated raw emotion, Nicole's demanded control. The contrast between Nashville's chaos and Hollywood's polish became more than just geographical. It was emotional. It shaped how they communicated, how they coped, and ultimately, how they drifted. Then there was Australia, their shared origin, their emotional refuge. Whenever things grew too heavy, they would return home, away from the cameras, to the familiar coastline and soft-spoken quiet that reminded them of who they once were. It was there, friends say, that Nicole often reflected most deeply on what her life had become, not with resentment, but with quiet sadness. Australia wasn't just their homeland. It was the place where the illusion of their perfect life dissolved into something more honest. As years passed, the dynamic of their marriage evolved. The early years of passion and rescue turned into endurance and routine. Nicole was no longer the young woman desperate to prove that love could heal. She had grown into a woman who understood that love can't always save, but it can transform. In interviews during the 2020s, she began to speak with a new kind of honesty. Without directly naming Keith, she reflected on the emotional cost of carrying someone else's pain. Sometimes, she said softly, you lose yourself in trying to help another person find themselves. Her words struck a chord, not just because of who she was, but because of what they revealed. A truth that no publicist could polish. After nearly 2 decades together, Nicole and Keith had endured everything: addiction, distance, success, and the unforgiving glare of fame. Yet the true challenges had always unfolded away from the public eye. In hotel rooms after long tours, in quiet phone calls from distant film sets, in moments when love felt more like endurance than joy. By the 2020s, they had learned to coexist in a quieter rhythm. The intensity of their early years gave way to something steadier, but also more detached. Maturity brought wisdom and distance. When Nicole finally opened up in interviews about darkness and growth, it wasn't scandal she was hinting at, but survival. She spoke about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to live in truth instead of image. The spaces that once defined them, Nashville, Hollywood, Sydney, had each played a role in shaping their journey. Nashville gave them passion and pain. Hollywood gave them pressure and perfection. And Australia, their home, gave them perspective. Together, these worlds built and tested their love, exposing every fault line and every truth they'd spent years avoiding. Behind closed doors, the story was never about glamour or gossip. It was about two people trying to navigate life under a microscope. They had built a family, fought private battles, and learned that even love built on genuine affection can fracture under the relentless demands of fame. What Nicole later revealed wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. The dark side wasn't just Keith's demons or the cost of fame, it was the silence, the distance, the emotional weight of two worlds constantly pulling them apart. And as time moved forward, Nicole began to find peace, not in pretending everything was perfect, but in finally acknowledging what it cost to live a life that looked perfect to everyone else. Because in truth, the real story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban wasn't written in the headlines. It was written in the quiet spaces between them. In the homes they built, the words left unspoken, and the choices that kept them together long after love had started to fade into something far more complicated. The revelation and the road to freedom. By the time the 2020s arrived, Nicole Kidman had lived almost 2 decades inside a story that the world thought it already knew. To the public, she was the perfect wife, the nurturing mother, and the graceful Hollywood icon. But behind that polished image was a woman quietly reevaluating everything: her marriage, her career, and herself. Nicole and Keith's journey had been marked by devotion and turbulence in equal measure. Their story began in 2005 with the kind of electricity that draws two people together across worlds. She was the elegant Oscar winner with a reputation for restraint. He was the charismatic musician who wore his heart and his scars openly. Their connection was real, and it moved fast. By June 2006, they were husband and wife, celebrating under candlelight in Sydney, their shared homeland. For a while, everything looked flawless, but only months later, Keith's struggle with addiction resurfaced, forcing Nicole into a role no partner ever dreams of playing: the savior. From 2007 onward, Nicole became Keith's anchor. She was the steady force in the background while he faced rehab and recovery, often flying between continents to be by his side. The tabloids called it unbreakable love. But behind the headlines was exhaustion, the kind that seeps in when love turns into responsibility. Nicole once said she learned early on that you can't fix someone no matter how much you love them, a statement that only makes sense after years of living it. Through the 2010s, both of their stars rose higher than ever. Nicole's performances in Big Little Lies and The Undoing showcased a woman channeling emotional truth into her art, perhaps more than anyone realized. Those roles of women trapped between love and control, passion and fear, seemed almost too close to home. Keith, meanwhile, was conquering the music scene, his name now synonymous with country music success. Together, they looked untouchable. Yet success can be its own kind of prison, one that forces you to keep smiling while quietly falling apart. By the time the 2020s arrived, cracks had begun to show, not in public scandals, but in subtle silences. Nicole stopped speaking about her marriage in interviews. She no longer described herself as part of a team, and her tone shifted from devotion to introspection. In one interview, she reflected, "You reach a point in life where peace matters more than perfection." Fans heard wisdom in her words, but to those who had followed her story closely, it sounded like a goodbye, not to Keith necessarily, but to the version of herself that had spent years trying to hold everything together. The revelation wasn't explosive. It was quiet, dignified, and deeply human. Nicole began to open up about the emotional cost of constantly performing happiness. She spoke about how women, especially in the public eye, are expected to hold their families together, often at the expense of their own mental and emotional well-being. "People see the glamour," she said softly, "but they don't see the work, the healing, the forgiveness, the letting go." In many ways, Nicole's revelation was not about Keith's darkness, but about her own awakening. She had spent years living between worlds, the heart of Nashville and the chaos of Hollywood, and both came with heavy expectations. Nashville was Keith's home, filled with music, temptation, and community. It was where he belonged, and she tried to make it hers too. But the country music world thrived on emotion, on vulnerability. Hollywood, on the other hand, was built on illusion and image. For Nicole, navigating between those worlds meant constantly shifting who she had to be, composed in one, tender in the other. And then there was Australia, the place where both of them could finally exhale. It was their grounding space, far from flashing lights and whispers. There, surrounded by the familiar sounds of the ocean and the privacy of nature, Nicole often reflected on what her life had become. Friends say that when she returned home, she seemed lighter, as if the noise of fame faded long enough for her to hear her own thoughts again. It was in those moments of solitude that she began her true road to freedom. She learned that letting go doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes, it means releasing the expectations that no longer serve you. Nicole had built her entire adult life around love, first in her marriage to Tom Cruise, then with Keith Urban. But for the first time, she began building her life around herself. Her revelation wasn't one of scandal, but of strength. She didn't expose Keith's flaws or betray his trust. Instead, she peeled back the curtain on the human cost of loving someone through their darkness. "There's beauty in truth," she said in one recent interview, "even when that truth isn't what people expect." Those words carried the weight of years spent smiling through pain, of standing in the spotlight while carrying invisible scars. The road to freedom wasn't linear. It came in quiet realizations, in choosing peace over performance, in understanding that love doesn't have to mean sacrifice. Nicole had once been defined by her relationships, as someone's wife, someone's partner, someone's support system. But now, in her mid-50s, she was reclaiming her identity not as an accessory to another person's journey, but as the author of her own. And Keith? In many ways, he too had changed. Age and experience mellowed him, and though their connection remained, it evolved into something more grounded, less dependent, more honest. They had both learned that true love is not about possession, but respect. And sometimes, the most powerful act of love is giving someone the space to be who they really are, even if that means stepping back. For Nicole Kidman, the dark side of Keith Urban was never about betrayal or scandal. It was about the shadows that fame, addiction, and expectation cast on love. It was about learning that even the brightest lights come with their own form of darkness, and finding peace in that truth. Today, she stands not as the woman who endured, but as the woman who evolved. Her revelation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, measured, and full of grace. The road to freedom didn't lead her away from love, but toward a deeper understanding of it. Because for Nicole Kidman, freedom was never about escaping. It was about finally being seen, not as a star or a symbol, but as herself. Thank you for watching the video. Nicole Kidman's story shows that true strength comes from honesty and finding peace within. If you found this story moving, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more untold celebrity stories.